Hey, welcome to Deck Check. Today we'll be checking out my deck, Humans Blue Farm. I won this tournament at 1 life on a mold of 5 in 4th seat. It was a super exciting game, so stay tuned and we'll explore the deck list and the matches. So here's a picture of me right after the tournament. This was after 11 hours of cEDH. And as you can see, I have a lot more hair. Had a haircut since then. So the way this video is going to be laid out, we'll start with an about me, then we'll be checking out the deck that I used, and then we'll be going over the 2 rounds that I won. So I've been playing Magic for about 7 years, maybe more. I have not competed in any major tournaments. My first one was Chaos Treasure Series 5, which was a couple months ago. I'd been playing Blue Farm for about a month before that happened. After that, gave me some confidence. I then top 16 and top 8'd in some other locals. And most recently, I won Mystery MTG's Season 3 Store Championship, which is what this video is about. Okay, so let's check out my deck. So, Timna Crom, I'm sure many of you are familiar. I won't be going over exactly how the whole deck list works, but I will be going over some of the tech cards. I'll just give a quick, brief overview. Basically, the way this deck works is you have 2 very powerful draw engines in the command zone. You have Timna and you have Crom. And then what you're trying to do is either get a quick early game ad nos, which is going to be right here, where you draw like 30 cards and then win with a bunch of fast mana into any combo you want. Or you're going to try to maybe go for a Thassa's Oracle win, or with last thing being probably Underworld Breach, which is here, and you do the classic combo with Breach, Lion's Eye Diamond, Brain Freeze, and then you just win the game from there. My list is a bit different from most lists. It is a bit similar to Koval's list, although a lot of these decisions I made independently before actually watching his video at all. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk about some of the tech pieces I added and why I did that. Notion Thief being one of them. So the way this tournament was structured, we played a league that lasted about 3 months, and I was ranked 2nd in that league for that time. And then we had a top 8, and everyone that made top 8 in the league was going to participate in the top 8 tournament. So basically what I'm saying is I had a general idea of what people were probably going to play. There was a Tivit player, a Najeela player, a Sauron player who actually couldn't show up, Sissa player, Shorakai, and Tivit. So I didn't add anything too mean to hard counter these certain decks because I like everyone there. But I did add a couple of tech cards. So Notion Thief, Fairy Mastermind, and REB were the ones that I switched out. I took out Lavinia because I noticed there wasn't a lot of turbo. I took out Praetor's Grasp because it was kind of slow. I took out Containment Priest because while Najeela and Sisse do have a little bit of not casting creature, cheating them out, none of the other decks really did, so I didn't really feel like it was necessary. Fairy Mastermind I think was a pretty smart choice because any game with Shorakai, Fairy Mastermind is just going to get you a ton of value. It's also good against Tivits and Saurons because they also tend to draw more than 1 card a turn. I mean, most decks do with Rishtik and Mystic and all that. And then I also threw in REB because I just think it's a good card and it's good in the meta. I also slammed in the One Ring, which actually turned out to be really impactful. This wasn't for any particular deck or any particular reason. It's just I wanted to try out the card. I wanted to see if it was good because I've played against it a lot. And every game I've played against it, it seemed really good. So yeah, so that's the tournament structure. The tiebreakers were done by our league points, and I'll be explaining a little bit more about that in a sec. Okay, so here we get to round 3. I was playing first on Tim McCrom, and then after me was Rogsai, then Sisay, and then Tivit. So I kept my second mulligan. So I had 3 lands, Mystic Remora, Ragavan, and Wishclaw Talisman. So turn 1, obviously, I'm going to play my Remora and just kind of pass the turn. The table goes like, we're not going to feed this fish. So I'm like, whatever, I'm keeping this around anyway. And I did for at least a couple turns. And then turn 2, I pay to keep my Remora and I play out my Ragavan, which actually hits an insane hit after I play it. And then the other players actually all play 3 draw engines. So it's a pretty funny turn cycle where Rogsai goes Ristic, Sisay goes Mystic, and Tivit goes Ristic. So in the meantime, I was drawing a bunch of cards off for Remora because they were playing like, Mana Rocks and other sorts of things. So I had a pretty decent hand at that point. So turn 3, I swing at the Rogsai player who did have his Rograk out, so he could have blocked, but I mean, you know them, they want their fast mana, so he just let it through, and Ragavan had a mega snipe, and he hit Underworld Breach off the top. So it was a pretty interesting hit. At the time, I didn't really have many cards in library, just like 2 or 3. I think I had 3 cards in library, but this is actually relevant. So yeah, so I drew into Dockside at some point during all these draws. So I just played it out, and I got like 5 treasures off of it. And it didn't it didn't get countered. So I was like, okay, so if this doesn't get countered, this means my opponents probably don't have like specifically Force of Will, Pact of Negation, because creatures are kind of hard to counter in general. So I played out the Dockside. It resolved. So I was like, okay, cool. Let me see if I can do this again, because I Chain of Vapor in hand. So I bounce my Dockside again, it resolves, and then I crack a land because I'm trying to go for the win this turn. And I try to bounce the Sisay's Remora just to see if I can try to get some counter magic or something out of the way, which I did. So I don't know if it's shown here, but the Sisay player actually deflecting swats this Chain of Vapor over to the Ristic Study, which then resolves. And throughout this, the other players are just drawing a bunch of cards, but I'm like, I don't care, I'm just gonna go for it. Yeah, so after that, I had a Diabolic Intent in hand, so I just sacrificed my Dockside Extortionist after I replayed it, and I went and I tutored, and I spent like a couple minutes just kind of thinking about like what I wanted to get. I was just looking through my whole deck, and I was getting kind of glares from the other players, but it was taking like 2 or 3 minutes. But I was really thinking about it. I was thinking about like, do I want to go for Silence, or do I want to go for something else? So in the end, I just because my Dockside resolved, I was thinking what I want to do is I want to go for Abolisher, because people are going to have creature counterspells. So I grabbed the Abolisher off the Diabolic Intent. And here's a wide Grand Abolisher. I cast it and it actually resolves. I heard from the Sisay player after the game that they actually had a Force of Negation. So it's like, this is definitely the correct play. And the whole time I'm not paying for any Ristics or anything like that. They're drawing off that. And then I had Consultation and Wishclaw in hand. So what I actually did is I cast the Underworld Breach, because after I cast the Breach, I was down to only 2 treasures. So I couldn't combo off. After the Abolisher and the Breach, I was down to 2 treasures. So I recast the Dockside with the Breach, exiling like literally my last 3 cards. And then I get like a bunch of treasures, and from there it's just I slam Wishclaw. I had Consult, I find Thoracle with the treasure mana, I just play Thoracle and I win the game. So really fast game. I didn't expect it to end that quickly, to be honest. But yeah. So this is the exciting game. This was my round 5. So the way the structure of that tournament worked, so since I was second in the league, I would automatically beat out anyone with the same record as me besides the first player. So I only had 1 win, but there were other people that had 2 wins, so I actually had to go 4th. But I beat out everyone else that had 1 win. So I was like, oh crap, I'm in 4th position. I gotta get something good here. So I really aggressively mulled. I think I shipped a hand with Ragavan in it. Even I think my second 7 had Ragavan, and I just threw it away. So I mulled down to 5 cards, and my mulligan to 5 had 2 lands, a gamble, the 1 ring, Ranger Captain, and my top deck was an MBT, my Brick Trap. So my bottoms were Pact and Rite of Flame, because Pact is not going to do anything in the early game, you know, and Rite of Flame, you know, I'd rather just have the land. Yeah, this was a 2-hour long match. It was nuts. I honestly don't know how I pulled it out. So, turn 2. It's turn 1, we just played lands. So turn 2, the Tivit player on turn 1 had played Mana Vault and Lotus Petal, so he was threatening a turn 2 Tivit. On my turn 2, when it got around to me, I just gambled for a Mana Crypt. And I threatened to counter Tivit, which I could have done if he played a couple more spells in Mindbreak Trap. But it turns out I didn't have to. Yeah, on turn 1 I gambled for Mana Crypt, and then turn 2 I played out the 1 ring with 2 lands and Mana Crypt. And on the turn 2, Orm's Chant, I convinced the Shortcut player to just Orm's Chant the Tivit, because if Tivit resolves on like turn 2, we probably just lose, honestly, because like the commander just gets so much value. So yeah, I get protections. That's pretty cool. So that happens. Not much really happens in the early game, besides the Najeela player plays a 1 ring, which I try to get people to counter because I couldn't at the time, but it resolves, sadly. And the Shortcut player plays a Remora, which just stuck on the board the whole time. So I'm going in, I'm drawing a few cards here and there with 1 ring, and at some point the Tivit player goes ahead and gets out of Bowmasters, which just gets huge through like his 1 ring, my 1 ring, Remora. I don't remember exactly how big it was, but it was a really thick boy. So no one really tries to win for a while. The first person that tries to go off with the win attempt is actually Najeela, and he's just been drawing a crap load of cards with 1 ring, and he gets out Najeela, and then he plays Derevi. And this leads to a stack interaction. I actually didn't have any removal for Derevi, so I couldn't really do anything. It was on the other 2 players. So first Derevi gets swords, but the Najeela has a counterspell for it. So that resolves, and then the Shortcut player just taps it anyway. So yeah, it just kind of dies. Something else that happened of note is the Najeela player got a Phantasmal Image. So he just kind of plays it, kills the other Bowmaster, and he gets his own like huge, like as the turns progress, he gets his own huge orc army. And through all this Shortcut player, like a champ, is just paying every upkeep to keep this Remora around. So in the mid game, I did kind of make a deal. I was like, hey, don't attack me with this orc army, Mr. Najeela, and I will counter this Rhystic Study, which I did do, and thankfully the Najeela player did keep their end of the bargain, so I did not get whacked that turn with that big boy. but I did get whacked later. So this is partially why I went down to 1 life. I probably should have blocked in hindsight, but at the time I was just like, I'll just take the damage. It's okay, I can block later. So I got down to like about 13. And at some point I flashed in an opposition agent and cast my commander. But these weren't too impactful during the game. Yeah, so the next huge thing to happen is a Tivit player plays his commander finally, because I just tell him I don't care, you can resolve it at this point. I'm not, I mean, I don't like it, but I'm not like super scared. I'll use my removal on something else. And yeah, so Short Guy plays Out of Time, which is huge. Like, it just completely wipes the board. There are a few other creatures. I think Jilo's out as well. So everything just gets completely phased out, which is good for me because I was only at 13. So I'm happy to see this. It means Tivit player can't win either. So that goes through. After a couple turns, the One Ring keeps pinging my life total. So I tried to cast a Dockside to, maybe just get some mana. I did have Diabolic Intent in hand, so I was thinking maybe I could try to go for a win. But honestly, I didn't really think I could win at that point. There's just, everyone had like counter spells up, so I was really just trying to get some mana. But the Geo player actually countered my Dockside. I tried to offer, he can't refuse it back. But with the treasures they got, they just threw another counterspell at it, so he just died before he got to live. That's pretty sad. I actually did win this Mana Crypt roll, so I'm still at 7. After that, the Tivit player brings back his Bowmasters with Savines, which is pretty annoying because Bowmasters was huge this game. With all through the One Ring and the Remora, and this has like 7 counters on it by now. Like, the Short Guy player kept this around for 7 turns. And my One Ring draws. Yeah. So yeah, I'm at 7. I kind of like, I didn't really have that many lands or like artifacts out, so I was thinking, why not just try to maybe Savines back this Dockside, and the Savines get counter, I could maybe flash it back later. So I Mystical Tutor for Savines, which this does resolve, and then I try to Savines Dockside, but that gets countered. So this is the second Dockside I've tried to get that just hasn't resolved. Yeah, so that kind of sucks. And then the One Ring pings me for 4 at this point. So I go down to 3. So I'm like, oh crap, I'm gonna lose. Like, for most of this game, like I was on the huge like back foot. Like, I didn't really have much to do. But yeah, so I'm like, I don't want to just die to my One Ring. So I Chain of Vapor, I crack it, crack a land, and I bounce my One Ring and Mana Crypt back to hand. I recast the One Ring just so I have protection because I don't want to die from whatever. I didn't want to sack 1 more land to bounce Out of Time because I kind of liked that it was shutting off like so much. So after that, the Shorkai player goes for a win attempt in his upkeep with the Remora trigger on the stack, because he was wanting, what he said was he wanted to just bounce his Remora, replay it, get the age counters off of it, which is reasonable, but also it's freaking Hullbreaker Horror, and he had a Mana Crypt and a Voltaic Key or something, so some other rocks, so he was threatening infinite. So the Tivit player, I unfortunately hadn't drawn any removal still, but the Tivit player tried to path it. The Hullbreaker player responded with some sort of counterspell, but then the Najeela forced the counterspell, and then he cast like one other thing and just bounced Hullbreaker back to his hand. So looks like he got it back, and he did also manage to bounce back his Remora during this whole time, so he just replayed it. And yeah, and then on my next turn, I played my own Remora. to try to get some cards. And keep in mind my One Ring's at 0, so I wasn't really losing any life off it. So people have been losing a lot of life throughout this whole interaction. Like, there's been Bowmaster triggers, there's been huge like orc army swinging at people. So life has been super relevant this whole game. So after that turn cycle, neither of these players really do like that much, besides the Nijiyo player drawing a lot with the One Ring. And the Tibet player is just kind of hanging back, holding up counter spells. The Shortcut player tries to go for it again with Hullbreaker, but he is at 9 line. So he at this point has Mox Opal and Mana Crypt and like a few other artifacts. So this is infinite mana. But I had a Remora on the board. So what he was bouncing and replaying his Mana Crypt and Mox Opal, but every time he did that, I would get a Remora draw, which would then trigger the Bowmasters. So every time he would try doing this, he was getting pinged for 1. So he played the Opal, he played something else, and he actually tried to bounce my Remora. But luckily, while he was doing this, he got down to like 3 life from all the Bowmaster pings. And with that bounce trigger on the stack, the Nagila and Tibet player were casting a couple spells, so I kept drawing. And he cast 2 spells on this turn. So this just pinged him to death. And once he died, Out of Time just was gone. And also the bounce trigger for my Remora got exiled. So all his spells just went away. So once Out of Time was gone, we all got back our stuff. I didn't really get anything that crazy. But the other players did. Like, he got back his Nagila, he got back Orc Army, and he got back his phased out Orc Army and his other huge Orc Army. So he's in a, he's in a great spot. And I should mention, like, the turn before, he had given me like a Wish Claw, which does come in, which does become relevant. So here I am. I'm at 3 life after all these like Bowmaster pings and One Ring life and Mana Crypt rolls. So I decide to not die, or at least try not to, and use Wish Claw to try to find my own Swords to Plowshares, so I can Swords my own Crom with this Mana Crypt trigger still on the stack. Because if I lose this Mana Crypt trigger, I just die. Alright, so I Wish Claw, I find the Swords, I cast Swords targeting my own Crom. And this turns into a huge thing. Like, I'm trying to convince them not to counter my Swords, because I'm just, trying to live. But they weren't having it. So the Tibet Fierce Guardianships my Swords. I respond with, because I didn't really have any counter spells that I could cast besides Mindbreak Trap, and I couldn't cast it because they hadn't cast 3 spells. So I respond with Tainted Pact, and luckily it finds me a Pact of Negation, which I do cast. But the Tibet player had a Dothy. So what he did is he cracks it and uses my Tainted Pact, and he hit his own Force of Negation, or Pact of Negation, I'm sorry. And he packs my Swords to Plowshares. So I didn't realize it this time, but I did have Mindbreak Trap I could have cast, but this was like 11 hours of cEDH, so I didn't notice it. So I was like, oh crap. So I let the stack resolve, and I was like, okay, if I die to Mana Crypt, I die. Whatever. So I roll for Mana Crypt, and luckily it lands on an even. So I live. And after that, I go into my turn. They played some spells which triggered my Crom, which got them 1 more Bowmaster ping. which put me down from 2 life to 1. And then I had like 2 lands up, and I had a Mana Crypt up. So I used the Mana Crypt to cast a Mana Vault, which allowed me to flashback Savines, and finally I get back my Dockside, and I also get back this Ranger Captain of Eos, which is what the Gamble discarded in the early game. So I get back the Dockside, I get 5 mana, or actually I think it was more than that. It was like a bunch of treasures, a lot of treasures. And I crack Ranger Captain, I search for Esper Sentinel, whatever, it doesn't matter. And then from there, I really want to be safe, so I Diabolic Intent, I sack my Dockside, I find Breach, and then I loop this again. I Diabolic Dockside again, because I have a bunch of cards in my graveyard at this point, because I've been drawing and having to discard down to hand size a bunch this game. So I use that to find Grand Abolisher, even though, you know, they're already silenced with Ranger Captain. I just figure, you know, better safe than sorry. So I had Consultation in hand, and then I did this one more time to find Thassa's Oracle, and then I played Thassa's Oracle, and then cast Demonic Consultation in response to the ETB, and I named Exodia the Forbidden One. And then I won at 1 life. So yeah, thanks for watching. I'll have all my stuff linked in the description below. Please subscribe, like, all that stuff. Send this video to a friend if you liked it, and I'll see you next time.